All right, League of Shadows. So another trade review coming at y'all here. So a couple more recent trades happened than the one I'm going to review, but those more recent ones were between myself and Ty. So we're not going to get into those. I'm not going to review my own trades. If anybody else wants to do that, feel free. I think I've already gotten some unsolicited review on those from a couple of you. So thank you for the feedback on what I did in those more recent trades. Comfortable with what happened in them. There's always that doubt after the fact. I think anytime you trade away anybody that is meaningful to your team, regardless of whether they're going to be able to provide you any immediate help, you're going to get some flack from other owners, especially if you go against your own word that you may have uttered in the past. But we'll go away from that and we'll talk about the trade here from last Friday that happened between Jimmy and Kevin. This trade, definitely not a blockbuster here like the one that I reviewed last week that involved Antonio Brown. Also a trade involving Kevin. But for the trade this week, we've got Kevin giving up here Jordan Matthews, Buffalo wide receiver, as well as his 2018 round 2 pick and his 2018 round 4 pick. So a couple of early to mid-round draft picks and Jordan Matthews, and then he's picking up from Jimmy Samaje Perine and Chris Thompson, both Washington running backs, as well as Golden Tate. So pretty interesting here because Kevin is finally getting some of that running back help that he needs. Chris Thompson has had some huge weeks. Now that I'm getting the chance to review the trade after week 4, we can see that the game didn't really play out in his favor there. But I know that even my fantasy league has a sort of article analysis type thing up under Chris Thompson that cites game flow as the issue for him in that game, to where he wasn't able to get going like he was in past weeks. I could see Chris Thompson rebounding here and definitely being a startable running back for Kevin. So I think it's definitely some big help to him, as well as Samaje Perine. He's getting some young players in these trades. The last one he gets Alvin Kamara. This one he gets Samaje Perine, who's also a rookie running back that's got potential. So he could be setting himself up here for some real value in the future. Maybe guys who aren't going to contribute so much now, but are going to definitely be pieces for him in the future, at least cogs in a franchise and on a roster that could really be effective here going forward, and that already has been affected here. Through 4 weeks of the season, he sits at 2-2, and I don't know if anybody else noticed this, and this is aside from the trade, Kevin was one play away from being 3-1, and I remember watching it last night on Monday Night Football, sitting there almost in shock, and I was also cracking up at the same time because it's just the kind of luck that you see happen in fantasy football that just can turn the whole fate of a franchise's season around. I'm forgetting his name. You had a linebacker. It was Justin Houston, and he picks up a fumble on what I believe was a fumble on the drill at the end of the game where where they were trying to score here, and this game was I'm just watched this game last night. Can I just pull this up really quick here? The Redskins had their end of game desperation drill going, and they were doing the lateral and backwards passes, and one of them is dropped. Justin Houston picks the ball up, runs it in for a touchdown. That gives Trent enough points to actually pass Kevin on that final play of the game. If it wasn't for that, Kevin would be 3-1. Hate to bring that up for you, Kevin, if you're watching this, but it's just crazy luck, and it's something that I couldn't avoid mentioning when I'm talking about a trade that involves you. So, sorry about that, but you got to say it's a little hilarious. Not for you so much, but definitely for the rest of us. But sorry about that, man. So getting back to the trade, really what it comes down to here, in my opinion on this one, Kevin's definitely kind of reaching a little bit here, I would say, but he's getting some of the help that he's going to need for the stretch run, I think, in Chris Thompson, who is probably going to be a fairly reliable RB2, RB3 option for the rest of the season. I would say I don't see him as a running back one just because Washington has a committee kind of setup going, but I could see him being reliable for some pretty good weeks in the future in this season, at least for this season. but it may not be the most consistent production, so he could be a little bit of a shaky start type player where you're putting him in there, not with full confidence, but with the possibility that he could have a huge week or that he could just produce for you if he's able to get into the flow of the game. Now, looking at things on the side here for Jimmy, he's basically replacing Golden Tate with Jordan Matthews. I would say production-wise, value-wise, those two players slot in very similarly in that wide receiver 3 type role, where if you're starting 3 receivers, you can feel fairly comfortable putting one of these guys in. Right now, Golden Tate is actually in as a kick returner, so I'd have to go into. I know he was not started by Jimmy in the first 3 weeks of the season, but he did have a couple weeks where he passed 11 points. Week 2 didn't put up a good game against the Giants, but he did have some production already. I know that Kevin also didn't use him in week 4, based on what the player info shows for him. So there's no real stats to put into play at this point. Past those first 3 weeks for Golden Tate, you look at Jordan Matthews. He's got a fairly reliable quarterback throwing to him in Tyrod Taylor. He's also injured as of now, and he was not injured when the trade happened, so that does kind of change things at this point. But he had a couple of fairly productive weeks, couple of 60-yard receiving games. But the amount of targets that he's getting are definitely a little bit of cause for concern if you were going to be using him. But with Jimmy's roster, I don't think that he has the need to put Jordan Matthews in anytime soon. You're looking at a roster with Doug Baldwin, Odell Beckham, Des Bryant, Larry Fitzgerald. You could even say Kenny Stills. Dante Moncrief has been fairly productive. Devin Funchess, with what he's done in the past week, has basically broken out at this point with his week 4 performance. Scores twice. Probably going to see inconsistency from him, but I don't think Jimmy has to worry about leaning on Jordan Matthews anytime soon, possibly in the bye weeks. Might as well look at it. He's got a variety of bye weeks here for his wide receivers. He's not going to be missing more than, looks like, 3 wide receivers in any given week, and they are not, those weeks don't consist purely of starters. His toughest week is probably coming up in week 6, where he's going to be missing Doug Baldwin and Des Bryant. That's where a little bit of creativity is going to come into play for him. So other than that, I don't think he has to worry about leaning too much on Matthews. Plus, he's getting the 2 picks in this trade. Picks are always great, especially if you're giving up players that you may not have been using. The one downfall is you're giving up Samaje Perine, who's got promise. You're giving up Chris Thompson, who has showed the ability to produce, and you're giving up Golden Tate, who, like I said, is a good wide receiver 3 type player who you can definitely slot in, for example, on the bye week. So he may miss Golden Tate a little bit in week 6. But overall, I think this trade really does work pretty well on both sides. I don't think it's a necessary trade for all intents and purposes, but Kevin does get some help here. Could he have gotten more reliable running backs in a different type of trade? It's possible, but who knows what the market was like for any of the players that he's willing to give up at this point. I would say if you're able to get somebody on your team when you are desperate for running back help, who you can pretty reliably say, I can start this guy and feel pretty good about the chances that he at least puts up some production for me, if not a huge week, like he's already proven he can do. So he got the job done in this trade. And I think Jimmy got some value here as well with some of the future value from the picks, as well as a serviceable backup type, slot in bye week type player like Jordan Matthews for when he is healthy again. Obviously, he won't have him for the next few weeks, but regardless, I think this trade works for both sides. Not going to give either side an A in this trade because I don't think anybody got anything earth-shattering, but you can give each side a solid B on this one. Was it a necessary trade? Not really for Jimmy, somewhat for Kevin. He had the room for flexibility on his roster in a sense, but definitely good to increase his depth a bit. So I'm going to give a B on both sides for this one. I think the trade worked out as it should have for both people, and I don't really have a problem with it. So if you guys have any more feedback on this one, feel free to leave some comments. I'll start a new thread for this trade review, and thanks for watching. Bye, guys.